Hello. It's been a while, huh? I'm so sorry. It's Romania Black, and I know if you're on Patreon, you were like, bitch, what? But I took a vacation. This last week. I'm actually recording this before I go on said vacation, so it'll be ready when I get back for you all to watch. But, I'm sorry you had to wait on this episode. Although, Apothecary Diaries, in the weirdest way, has worked out for me recording this second season because there was a break between episodes 18 and 19, which kind of worked out with the convention that my brother and I went to. I was like, okay, this will actually work out on my recording schedule. Great. And I won't be behind. Great. And then I was worried. I was like, damn, I'm going to come back and be a couple weeks behind the episodes coming out, and people are going to have waited and waited for these videos. But then they announced that apparently the penultimate episode before the season finale is going to get delayed a week. And I was like, oh, well, this will work out. So it all ended up working out in the long run that I will be able to keep up kind of with the show and have it end on time. And I was like, awesome. You all had to wait a week now, but while everybody's waiting a week, I'll be catching up. So it all ended up working out in the end. And in the July update video, I already have plans for series that are going to replace this one when we're done, so you'll have to watch that video when we get to it. But yeah, it all actually ended up working out, but I'm sorry that you all on YouTube and Patreon had to wait a week. I'm going on vacation, so but I'm glad I get to see this episode before I go, because last week we ended on a cliffhanger with episode 19, or for you all, maybe a more than a week, with episode 19, as Shinme got introduced, and she's quite frightful. I like her already. I like a good villain. I like a good theatrical but scary villain, right? I like that. I think that some villains in anime can be a little bit bland, but I like a little bit of a diva. I like a little bit of a flair, and she seems to have a little bit of a flair with the furry collar coming in and this like sickly toxic honey voice. Like, I'm already into her, and we don't even know her yet. We just know a little bit of backstory from Genshi, and she's shown up brandishing a sword ready to cut their heads off, and I'm like, all right, Red Queen Aura, let's go. So I'm excited to see where that takes us, but I do have some comments that I want to talk about before we dive into this episode. Gus N for episode 19 says, biologically, there isn't really any difference between a grasshopper and a locust. I kind of caught myself in the discussion of episode 18 with that same conclusion, because if you noticed, I went back and listened to the discussion to prep before this episode, and I had said like, oh, well, grasshoppers, and they kind of eat plants and harm crops like locusts. And they are kind of the same thing. But they say locust is just a name for a grasshopper, which is exhibiting swarming behavior. Not all species of grasshoppers do that, though, so some types of grasshoppers will never be locusts. I thought it was interesting because it seemed like a tie-in to the whole colorblind conversation, because obviously if Shisui's dad is Shisho and he's colorblind, she has those genetic markers. So not everyone will be colorblind, but all people that are colorblind are people. So it's kind of the same thing. And then Alex Cornejo replied to that comment on Patreon, and the moderator got a huge kick out of it, saying, so basically like eating Tex-Mex, having no problem with the red and yellow bell peppers, but disliking the green bell peppers. Okay, now look, that's a thing. That is a thing. Do not say it's not. I can't describe it, but the red and yellow ones do taste a little bit different. Even if it's a placebo, there is a little hint of difference there, and I can't explain it, but it is. So, but they are essentially the same thing, right? No, I'm telling you, there is a little subtle difference. Maybe it's just the region I'm in or whatever, but that's really great. Ikapika, I think that's right. I think it's an I instead of an L. Ikapika for episode 19 says, about Suire's hand. She doesn't seem to use her left hand much, such as closing the book with just the right hand, which is a great observation. I didn't catch that. So I doubt that the scars were the worst thing that the medicine caused. There could be some nerve damage that makes it hard to use that hand. That is a really good point, because I had not considered that in the discussion. But yeah, the medicine itself, because I was trying to say, like, the medicine, would it cause like an outward scarring or would it be more internal? Well, the nerve damage would be internal. So yeah, using the medicine improperly or not using it or using it at all could cause that nerve damage. I wouldn't even be surprised if the scars were self-inflicted to help sell her story about past abuse when she became a eunuch, so people wouldn't question why she couldn't use her left hand properly. That all seems much more cohesive and a much better reason. I remember back when we talked about Suire being a eunuch and having the scars to begin with, I'd said in the discussion, were they self-inflicted? And there hasn't been any confirmation of that so far if they were self-inflicted, but given that she took the resurrection medicine, if it had caused nerve damage and she did the scars just to add to it, that would make a lot of sense. So big brain moment. I think that's a really good observation to have made. And then finally, H Banana 7 says, so they were talking about the different handmaids and ladies in waiting in the Garnet Palace, which is Lolan's palace, because that doesn't seem like it's going to work out really great for them. H Banana 7 was saying, so far the Crystal Palace servants were changed, which with Lihua. So now the Garnet Palace will also go through a big change. Gyokyo got 3 new servants, leaving Lishu's servants, which needs big changes soon as well. So yeah, Gyokyo got more servants to help protect her and Lingli and her new baby. Then you had Lihua's servants, which after Shin got called out, they were all changed up. And now you have the Garnet Palace, which, hell, if Lolan's gone and all that, who's going to be the new concubine? There's got to be 4, right? Isn't that 4 the magic number for the emperor? So maybe Aduo will come back and be like, sup, I'm just going to chill out here. Who knows? But then you have Lishu, Lishu's ladies in waiting, they're all a big problem. They really need to go. So honestly, I kind of like it because it brings up this conversation of things are changing and there needs to be a turnover. And I think that it also connects to the festering resentment from the previous episode in the clinic, where there are all these thoughts about the current imperial palace royal family that are going to need some turnover and change. And that's going to be something that I feel is going to extend on into later seasons of the show of, okay, what do we do now? And if Lihua's having a child and Gyokyo has a child, we've got to protect those children. We need to consider who our ladies in waiting are. There's going to be a lot of changes. And I'm a Taurus, so change is not always easy, but I feel like it's going to be necessary for this environment. So thank you for pointing that out, H Banana. I really appreciate that. But yeah, thank you all so much for the comments. I really appreciate them a lot. I'm super excited to see what all we're going to be getting this episode, because at this point we left on a cliffhanger. So what we going to do? But here's the thing. The moderator told me that I could technically watch the OP with this episode, but I told the moderator, I'm like, given the cliffhanger, and I just have a feeling in my gut, I'm like, I want to wait one more episode. I'm like, I'm going to wait till episode 21 to watch the OP, and then I'll have 21, 22, 23. I'll have 4 episodes with the OP. It will be fine. It will all be fine. I would rather be safe than spoiled. So I'm going to wait one more episode and see if we're all good. You all can comment down below if the OP is safe after this episode, or if I need to wait another one. I don't care to wait till the last episode. I don't. I've done in series where I've waited till the very last episode to watch the OP because the OP decides that it just has to have spoilers in it. I'm like, what the fudge, show? But I'm okay with doing that. So you can comment down below if it's safe after this week, or if you're like, no, Romania, just wait one more week or whatever. So we'll just have to see. But in any case, I hope you all enjoy this reaction and discussion afterwards. I'm super excited. We're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive into episode 44 overall, technically episode 20 of the Apothecary Diaries season 2. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's see what we get, y'all. Oh, friends. I love this episode so much. Oh, damn. No, man, is this my favorite new episode of season 2? This could be my new favorite episode of season 2. Man, what is it about the end of the season and Locken coming in and just... Oh, my God. There's a lot of reasons I love this episode. There's a lot of reasons. Basically, Genshi has his entire in-law family come in and being like, hey, if you want to be with our daughter, maybe you should, and I hate to use the phrase man up because that's such a sexist, stereotypical gendered phrase, and I hate to use it. But in the case of Genshi pretending to be a eunuch, it seems slightly appropriate. They're like, if you want to go be with our daughter, you need to man up and assume your job because you're the prince. And I know you're only 19, but shit's about to go down, and you sitting here doing paperwork is not going to solve the problem. Now, of course, the emperor should also be telling him this, but the emperor's got other things apparently going on. So I think that it would have been nice to have the emperor tell Genshi this, but there's a lot under the surface there of the emperor being Genshi's actual father and all of this. I think it's more appropriate symbolically for it to come from Locken, because not only do Locken and Genshi have this relationship where they've developed it since season 1, it's a great callback to that, of them being like, hey, remember we used to sit down and drink grape juice and just shoot the shit? Well, now the shit's gotten real. And I think it also allows Loman to come in and do his thing, which we'll talk about. Oh my gosh. But yeah, basically they're like, hey, if you want to end up with our daughter slash sister slash niece, you need to go do some stuff and you need to prove that you are worthy of her. And so Genshi is now like, now's the time. It's finally happened. But other than that entire scene, which I was just fangirling over so much, I love that this series is answering questions now and completely changing what I thought. So thank you all first and foremost for not spoiling me on Suire, because Suire's whole deal, I was like, oh, okay, that leaves more questions over here, but now we've got a very clear-cut picture of Suire is essentially Cinderella. she's Moriarty Cinderella, is essentially it, and Lolan is basically beautiful Anastasia. And there is no Drizella, so that's what we're getting at. It's like Cinderella 3, A Stitch in Time, except I want Suire to have her prince. So, man, I feel so bad for Suire after this episode. So bad. So much more is explained about her character that makes so much more sense with what she's been doing. I don't know if she really fits the Moriarty vibes anymore, but maybe Lolan does. I don't know. But I want to call her Lolan now instead of Shisui, because we found out Shisui is actually Suire's name. But I want to call Shisui Suire because that's what I'm used to. The web this series weaves, right? So, okay. And Shinme is very stereotypical in her design and makeup, so we need to talk about that, but it is highly effective in how stereotypical she is, and I'm like, so she is the wicked stepmother for sure. But let's get this timeline and all this cracking. So we have Shinme over here, and Shinme has this obsession. She has an obsession with her vanity and youth, which I'm sure was furthered from the OG emperor. I'm sure that is a side effect of trauma, because she originally was a concubine that was originally betrothed to Shisho, but then she was taken to the OG emperor. But here's the problem. When she was taken to the OG emperor, he probably didn't want anything to do with her because she was already too old for him, even though she was probably the appropriate age for him, because he was creepy and slimy and nasty. And so I am sure that her being denied, because she does seem to have the markers of a woman that was beautiful, that was physically beautiful. Not on the inside, but physically beautiful in her youth. Because Lolan does take after her dad, and like her face is rounder and everything, but other than that, she takes a lot from her mom in terms of looks. But Shinme seems like the type of woman that was physically beautiful, and then when she went to the OG emperor and was denied from him, because, good that she was denied because he was into some really terrible shit, but I am sure that completely messed with her ego, messed with her sense of self, her sense of worth, because she'd always been this beautiful woman. And I'm sure it messed her up. Not that it excuses anything that she does. She does some messed up shit in this episode, but it explains why she is this way. Why does she view vanity so profoundly? Because she's already been rejected once and she fears rejection. And so now she's obsessed with being beautiful because she equates physical beauty with self-worth and acceptance and love, which, as we all know, is not always the case. So that all makes sense with her having this trauma over her appearance and why she is now obsessed with the idea of an immortality potion. Which, as we, the audience, knows, is not possible. But this is back in the olden days where people were like, sure, just make it. Of course it's possible. And there's a probability, too, that she herself knows that it's not possible. But because she's having all this pent-up frustration about aging and losing her youthful beauty, I feel like she's taking out that aggression and anger, and rather than accepting, she's in denial, and she's just taking it out on whoever is a weaker body with less authority, which in this case is the apothecary. So she's like, well, I'll just blame you and get mad at you, or I'll just blame Suire and get mad at her, rather than it's a projection of her own insecurities, and rather than her taking accountability for it, she's just projecting it onto other people. And it's like, but yeah. So she wants this immortality potion, right? So here's the deal. Shinme got with Shisho, and they had Lolan. Which, it's curious that they call her Lolan. They named her Lolan. That's her actual name, because it has nothing to do with Shinme or Shisho. There's like, the characters aren't changed over, which, whatever. There could be a whole bunch of other ties that we don't know about. But then Shisho, meanwhile, while she was with the OG Emperor, Shisho married this unnamed woman. And she had a Shisui, who takes his name moniker, but she's renamed Suire after her mom and them are kicked out, right? And then she's brought back in as a servant, even though she is a half-sister to Lolan. And apparently Shisui takes a lot after the mom's side of the family, because she doesn't really look like she doesn't look like Shisho at all. Lolan looks like Shisho in the facial structure a little bit, but Suire looks nothing like her dad. So she takes after the mom's side of the family, which is quite believable because the Emperor's line, those kids all take after their moms. So that's very understandable. So yeah. So here's the thing. We get all that explained in this episode, which is awesome. I'm glad we've cleared all that up, and we know that Lolan and Suire are half-sisters. I'm glad we've cleared all that up and gotten that out of the way. That still leaves the mystery of meanwhile, we have down here this mystery about Taiho, which, let me tell y'all, that one commenter that was saying that Taiho and Shinlu were Yuri lovers, that theory's getting a lot more clarity after this episode. So yeah, we have the idea down here that we have Taiho, and, was Taiho having a thing with Shinlu? Why, who knows? But also, now we have the idea of Taiho. Taiho had this daughter with the OG Emperor, and now we don't know who that is. That's going to come back later. We don't know who that is anymore. I thought it was Suire. I was fully convinced it was Suire. It seemed to make sense it was Suire, but no. So now we have this daughter that was taken by the doctor, and kicked out, that we believe is the OG Emperor's daughter, but we don't know who that is anymore. The show does an amazing job, which is why it's so much fun theorizing about this show, because it does a lot of parallel things that make you think, oh, well, Suire came with a doctor, so it would make sense that she was tied and she's a doctor. the doctor's kid, and she's actually the OG Emperor's daughter. You would think that would be the case, but now we know that that's not. So there's still a half sister to Genshi, or a half sister to the Emperor, and a niece to Genshi that's out there running around somewhere. We don't know who they are at this point, but the fact that the show has brought them up and made that a storyline shows that later down the road, we've got something else to dive into. So I like that. I like the show is setting up threads that may not be answered this season, because I don't think we're going to find out this season who she is. I don't think we are. I think we're going to focus on this whole mess for the rest of the season. But I feel like that's for season 3 or later on. We're going to come back to that. And that's going to be a thing that's tied together. So then the question is, why in the world was Suire so obsessed with Taiho's grave? Why was she visiting there if she has no resemblance or relation to them? Well, I think the reason was because Suire understands what those women have been going through. Because Suire is trapped in this system. Lolan is trapped, but it's the very stereotypical, you're the daughter of nobility and you're destined to become the emperor's consort and blah, blah, blah. We know that song and dance from other narratives. But with Suire, I like Suire's complexity here, where, yeah, she could relate to Taiho. Taiho was never allowed to be free. She was stuck in the clinic, stuck in the rear palace her whole life, and was not able to have her own existence because of that. It also makes a lot of sense why Suire took on the form of a eunuch, and it ties symbolically to that. Not just the fact that it was a way for her to get to the rear palace, and it plot-wise makes sense, but if you think about it, we talked about it in season 1 with Sun Yao Ting's story, that for eunuchs, the only way for them to survive was for them to castrate themselves and go work in the palace and be a part of this system that was a prison, in fact, but was a way for them to survive and do so effectively. And for Suire, her becoming the servant to Shinme is a means of survival. It's a prison. She's stuck there. She's going to work there probably till she dies. She's not going to be able to go out and have her own life because of at this point, Suire, thinking of how she feels, she's scarred her body. She's damaged her body, which we're going to talk about the immortality potion in a second. Don't worry, I've not forgot about it. But she essentially has kind of ruined herself, quote unquote. She's not ruined. I love Suire, I think, but in the terms of how this society views women and views their attractiveness, she's kind of screwed herself. And whether that was from her own design or the word of someone else, we're going to talk about, but she feels just as imprisoned as those eunuchs that she's pretending to be, as those women that are stuck in the rear palace at the clinic. She feels just as imprisoned as them because of the consequences of the decisions she's had to make. And some of them were involuntary and some of them were voluntary. And so it's kind of like, why was she at Taiho's grave? Well, now it makes sense. She feels a connection to those women and feels just as trapped and hopeless as they do. And it adds so many layers to Suire's character. I am like 1,000 times on board with Suire so much. Lolan, to me, I like Lolan a lot, and I feel for Lolan. I really do. We'll talk about Lolan when we get to her scenes. I feel for her. But she kind of falls in line for me as like, I've seen that song and dance with that character. We know she's going to rebel. We know Lolan's going to like break out because she's going to have her like moment where she crashes and she can't follow her mom anymore. I've seen that narrative before, so I kind of know how it's probably going to play out. The show could surprise me though. It's done it this episode, but Suire is so interesting to me because she's a little bit more complex and different than storylines I've seen with characters like her. So I'm kind of like, I want to see where Suire goes and how she handles everything, because the Suire that I got from season 1 now not only makes more sense, but she's so much more vulnerable. She's so much more complex and layered than I was expecting. And I'm kind of all about that. I'm kind of all about it. But yeah, so let's get into this. Shinme is terrifying, and she has the claws, the 2 claws. I'm watching a series called Word of Honor right now. And there's a character in that series that has the same 2 type of claws, and they are tied to nobility. They're tied to elegance, which makes sense with Shinme's vanity that she has. Basically, from Word of Honor, people were explaining how women that had those nails, it was like a symbol that, it's kind of like when people have long acrylic nails. I can't do long acrylic nails, because I do work outside. Because I live near a farm. My parents have a farm. I could never have acrylic nails because you get down and dirty. You like get messing with animals and getting in the dirt and messing with stuff. Like there's no way I could keep them on. And acrylic nails are and historically have been status symbols because it's like, well, how do I function with these nails on? Well, the answer is you don't do much with them on. I'm sure now that's a generalization. I'm sure there's women in the comments that would be like, oh, I wear those nails all the time and I can do taekwondo and fix a carburetor in a car and all this. I'm sure that's the case. But historically, they have been status symbols of wealth and upper class privilege by having those nails. And so those two very elongated nails were a symbol, were a status symbol at the time of showing like, oh, I can't do work because, and this is a sign that I'm, nobility or upper class, I have money, and that's kind of where that status symbol comes from. Now, nowadays, there's probably men and women that wear those nails that can do all sorts of things that are hands-on working class things, and I'm not saying that, but symbolically over the course of history, that's what they've represented. So that instantly tells us, those two nails tell us all we need to know about her in one glance. And then, yeah, the moment she starts smacking around Suire, and Suire is so different. In this episode alone, we see her vulnerability immediately. We see and know of the problematic relationship she has where she is, which honestly, here's the thing. If it had been a different time and under different circumstances, Suire would be an amazing candidate for a consort. She's tall, she's imposing, she's beautiful, she has all these amazing features that her height gives her a sense of power and authority, which if you're going to be an empress, you'd want to have. Like, if a woman walked up that was 6 foot tall and then had heels on and had her all done up, I would be intimidated. And obviously Shinme, I think, knows that. Shinme is the type of bully that wants to instill fear into others and acts aggressively all the time to instill that fear. But the reality is Shinme is just as fearful of Suire because of how beautiful she is, because of how much potential she has. So she constantly wants to knock her down those pegs so that she doesn't feel the need so she doesn't feel like she could rebel even if she wanted to. But the reality is Suire is a catch. Suire is amazing, but I feel like Shinme has forced her to do all of these things to trap her in a corner where she feels like she is isolated and cannot get out. And then here's Maomao, who's actually like, actually, no, you can. And it's like, that's where the problem is. But I feel so much for Suire because Suire seems to be used by Shinme. Shinme seems to be using Suire as like a kind of pseudo, I wouldn't even say pseudo apothecary. Although Suire is smart enough, she could be the apothecary, right? But then obviously Shinme can't make Suire the apothecary because she is Shisho's biological daughter, and I don't think Shisho would go along with that, even if Suire has no chance of claiming any heir or rightful inheritance. I think that Shisho's still like, that's my flesh and blood. No, I'm not going to have you make her an apothecary and die. But what I think is happening on the sidelines is that instead of the apothecary, Shinme has basically made Suire like a lab rat. Because she said, keep your rats in line. Like she's the head rat, essentially. She's making Suire be the one to test drugs on herself, to test it, to make it work. And then we'll see a little bit later on in this episode that Suire's been doing a lot behind the scenes that I don't think Suire wanted to do, but she was told to do. And she just obeyed, which is so crazy in this episode. And she's like, oh, I've seen this child before. And so they say, oh, he's the Honorable Shiro's son. So he's with the Shi clan. Okay, and then Lolan comes in. So Kyo, we'll put him up here. Kyo is with the Shi clan and is the son of Shiro. And they're tied to the imperial palace. They seem like a middleman group, like they're in between Shisho and the royal family as like a clan that swore loyalty to both, and they're kind of caught in the middle of this. They seem like a linchpin group that if anything happens, they're going to cause the catalyst that's going to ignite the war between the two groups. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, we get Shisho with her insect mentality, and then there's Lolan all dressed up. Because she's like, oh, Mom, let's not get too hasty, right? Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The thing is, Lolan is so calm in this moment to try to keep her mom from flying off the handle. And she's like, well, let's not do that. Because the mom originally is like, we're going to cane Maomao 100 times, which is horrifying. And Lolan, she's like, no, let's not do that. She's like, let's not tie her to a pillar. And the thing is, Suire originally is like, hey, let's not do that. And she immediately gets smacked. Like, the fact that Suire and Lolan are trying to protect Maomao because they know Maomao's a good person, and they know, like, I feel like Suire and Lolan kind of see long-term trajectory. They kind of see, like, Maomao's worth of, hey, we know she's connected to Genshi in the royal palace. We know that harming her could have some bad repercussions, but you can't tell Shinme that, because what happens? Shinme smacks her across the face and is like, shut up, you weren't supposed to talk. So they're trying to protect Maomao because they see the long-term effects that Shinme is blinded to. She's like, I snuck in permission. And Maomao, meanwhile, is like, shit, I'm gonna die because I snuck in and I know too much. This is bad. And that's when Lolan's like, hey, you wanted a new apothecary. Here's your new apothecary. I also wonder if in all of this, because I've been wondering, why bring Maomao here? What's the point of bringing Maomao here? I think there's also another reason why. In addition to the hostage situation, because I do think that they had every intent of having her as a hostage, I think there's a new secondary reason. And this whole thing with the apothecary, I think that the apothecary has recently died, the one that they had before. Now, whether that apothecary died because of the medicines he was working on, or whether Shinme had him killed because he wasn't doing it fast enough, that's left for the audience to decide. But you can kind of read between the lines of which it probably was. So the hostage situation with the apothecary, because otherwise, why would they be so eager to put Maomao in that position if it was that dangerous? But they know Maomao can handle it, first of all, and they're probably planning on maybe hopefully trying to get her out of there before her mom acts. Who knows? We'll see next episode. But yeah, they're like, not only is she a hostage and something political, which, here's the thing, I don't think Shinme knows Maomao's connection to Genshi or Locken or any of that. I don't think she knows. I think just Suire and Lolan know. And I think Suire and Lolan are keeping those cards close to the vest because they're going to need them to keep her alive. So I think they're like, oh, no, Mom, she's actually related to these people. And then she's going to be like, well, why didn't you tell me? And they're going to be like, well, it didn't come up. You know, I feel like because Lolan lies through her teeth so easily in this, which, on the one hand, I could see people like not liking Lolan because she lies so easily, and it's like, how do I trust what you're saying? But we'll talk about her later on. I think we've seen how Lolan actually is, but her reasoning of why she does that is very understandable. It's just, we'll talk about it here in a minute. But I think one of the reasons, again, that Lolan convinced Suire to keep Maomao alive, because Lolan is a survivalist, is that also Maomao is essentially there to keep Suire alive. And like I said before, do I think that Shisho would let Shinme use his biological daughter as a guinea pig to make the immortality potion and then die because of it? No. But on the other hand, he's kind of let Suire have all these other things happen to her, or he doesn't know about them. We don't know which the case is. The former is a little bit scarier than the latter. It's kind of like, if he was okay with his biological daughter getting experimented on and cutting herself and risking possible death by infiltrating as a eunuch, that's scary in itself if he was okay with that. But the other thing is, if he doesn't know what all she's been to, that neglect kind of is scary as well. So it doesn't paint Shisho in a good light either way. It's like, yeah, you've doted on Lolan and put her in these situations, but you want Lolan to become a consort, but you totally sacrificed your younger biological daughter. It doesn't paint a good picture on Shisho either. Shisho seems very innocent, and innocent's not the right word, but Shisho seems very like kind of, oh, who, me? But it's kind of like, no, yeah, you need to take accountability, sir. So anyway, do I think that that Lolan kept Maomao around because she didn't want Suire to get offered up as the new apothecary? Because Shinmei's like, well, we need somebody, but maybe, I don't know. She's like, you said you needed a new apothecary. This is the girl. So he brought her here for that. And she's like, well, she doesn't look like an apothecary. And Lolan's like, well, she's actually over 30 years old. Lies through her teeth, which I'm like, girl, that's not a good lie to make because, Now, someone had told me they had shared on the Discord that originally, Maomao was supposed to be like an older woman, I think, in the original, maybe. I think it was shared on Discord. Maybe was Maomao originally supposed to be, someone said this at one point in the comments or something, that Maomao originally was supposed to be an old woman that had kids, and then the author was like, no, I'm going to change that. So it is kind of maybe a funny callback to Maomao originally supposing to be an older woman, and now it's like a callback of, no, actually, we changed the plot, but here we go. So that's kind of funny. I think that's interesting. That's like a nice little callback to it, but she lies through her teeth. She's like, after testing medicines on herself, she no longer ages. And now, Maomao, for being a 19-year-old, acts way more mature than a normal 19-year-old. Like, she acts, beyond her years, like, mature beyond her years because she's been raised by Loman. So she pulls off the I'm older than I look vibe very well, which, again, ties her to Genshi because Genshi does the exact same thing as the eunuch Genshi. So, yeah. She's like, we haven't figured out which specific drug it is, but she can make something approaching an immortality potion. If she fails, she'll just die like the man before. And Maomao's like, hey, cool, immortality potion, who's the man before? Like, Maomao's like, thanks for volunteering me so I don't get caned, but also, this could end up worse. So, I think it's also important to know that even though it's a dark space, there is light visible, and Shinme has not commented at all on the fact that Lolan's hairpin is in Maomao's hair, or that Genshi is in her hair, which to me says that, one, Shinme doesn't pay a lot of attention to Lolan, her daughter, because otherwise she would have noticed the hairpin. Doesn't pay a lot of attention to her actual daughter. And two, she's not as smart as she thinks she is. Because if she was really smart, she'd be able to pick up on the hairpin that Maomao has from Genshi and be like, where'd you get that? And all of that, like Lolan does, and like Suire does. But Shinmei's not as smart as she'd like people to think she is. And I think that's important too. She's just highly aggressive. So yeah. So they take Isla away, and they go away, and she's like, it must be really hard to get any work done here. So we'll take the apothecary with us to the Stronghold. Now, two things. One, I am glad they've left the village, because that leaves the village out of being decimated by Genshi's forces when they come through. So there's that. Although I imagine they'll probably go through the village asking where to get to the Stronghold and get passage. But two, I was kind of spoiled about the Stronghold in hindsight, because people had been sharing that episodes were going to be delayed, and the promotional poster for the second core, which I'm like, y'all be spoiling in this promotional materials, y'all. But it showed Maomao and them going up to the Stronghold. So it's like, okay, that part all makes sense now of why. Because I remember seeing that promotional thing, and I'm like, why is Maomao in the snow? There's no snow in this village. Now we know. So yeah. So she's like, so Maomao basically puts everything together with Lolan. When I gave the lecture to the concubine, she had the flashy outfit and listened expressionlessly. She's like, she hid from the Empress Dowager, but she didn't hide from me, since I didn't recognize her as the concubine when we caught Maomao the cat. That is a nice callback, that Lolan, it was like a test for her to be like, oh, you didn't recognize me as the concubine. I can keep being around you because you don't know who I am, or you haven't connected the dots. And Maomao had slowly connected the dots, but around that time, that's when she ended up getting taken by Suire and her. I do think when she says here, an insect-loving, quirky, gossiping, but ordinary girl, I think that's actually Lolan. I think that that's what Lolan would like to be. Lolan would like to have that freedom to be herself because she loves insects and she's quirky and weird, but she doesn't get the opportunity to be so because of her restrictions. And then Maomao's like, she played us all. And then if you notice, the next day, I'm glad that she put Genshi's hairpin back in because I was like, for a second, the animation left it out. And I was like, is this an animation error? Did Suire take the pin? Show, what are you doing? But then the next day, she has the pin back in, but she's taken Lolan's out. If you notice, she only has Genshi's pin back in at that point. Not Lolan's. So that to me is like a nice sign, along with this line, shiz, we played us all, that she doesn't trust Lolan anymore. Now, the sad part about that is that we as the audience know that Lolan is doing all of these things because of years of being trained by her mother and seeing how her mother acts, and then slowly having a lot of inner turmoil herself of, my mom's not getting any better. I thought if I went along with everything and did what she asked and was the little perfect doll that she wanted me to be, that things would get better. But as we know from many stories, as an English teacher, I'm like, I've seen so many narratives where that's the case, but the answer is no, it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And her only way of getting out of that cycle is to break herself off from it. Now, how Lolan breaks herself off from it, I don't know. My thing would be, because here's the thing, Lolan, if they're going to war with Genshi and them, when they all get caught, which I think will happen, there's going to be some serious punishments towards all of them. The only thing I can think of is if Lolan ends up helping, if Lolan and Suire end up helping Maomao escape from the Stronghold, by the time, which would be, I could totally see them doing that, because that would be the ultimate angst of Genshi arrives at the Stronghold, comes all in, prince on a white horse, white knight, all of this, and then Maomao's escaped and is gone, and it's like womp womp, like, you came all this way to rescue her and she's already gone and escaped. That would be very tragic, but I could see the show doing it for the angst. But if he shows up and Suire and Lolan had tried to help Maomao escape, I could see Maomao maybe speaking on their behalf, being like, hey, don't kill these two. Don't punish them severely because they did try to help me and they were, trapped within Shinme's system anyway. I don't know what that would effectively do, but I feel like I want Lolan and Maomao to have a conversation and get to talk to one another again, because I feel like right now Maomao doesn't trust her at all. And I feel like she needs to have a conversation with Maomao to ease that tension, but we'll see. So the Stronghold is crazy. What's even more crazy is the fact that, I guess it's not crazy, is that Genshi and them know it exists, because it's a fortress. How could you not notice it exists? But they know it exists, and Lahan, he has figured out that the price of iron going up, there's been expansion. They're like, hey, this Stronghold that would be pretty hard to get into if there was a battle or something, or a war, they might be prepping for some rebellion with all the stuff going down. I'm liking that we had all of that come together this episode, because I was wondering how they were going to get Genshi from point A to point B to get to the Stronghold, and now we've figured out what to do. So we have the apothecary room. I love the detail that some of the medicines are old and, haven't been used in a while, which would make sense because the Stronghold has been there a while, so they've not restocked medicines, because that would seem suspicious. So they're just using the medicines that have been there. But yeah, so she's like, I heard Lolan was Shisho's only daughter, but if he'd had another daughter, then that would be unforgivable by Shinme. Yep. She's like, Shinme hates me more than anything. So she's like, my father Shisho came, from one of the Shi clan's offshoot families. Okay, but the main family, Lady Shinme's family, saw his talents and adopted him. Okay, so originally, Shisho was adopted which would set up the right for them to be married later on by this. But he is actually connected to Kyo. That's why Kyo calls them family, because he's related to the Shi clan that Kyo's from. They're all connected too. Okay, that makes more sense. All right, and it looks like from the outline that Shinme was really pretty when she was younger, but nope. He was given the name Shisho and the two became engaged. Yep. But then during the late emperor's reign, she was taken to the rear palace as a consort, and then she returned later as a gift because she was too old, and it was like, nope, nope. And then we had all the trauma. But by that time, my mother and I were already with my father. Now, the mom does not have the same hair color as Suire. So, and from the flashbacks, it looks like Shisho kind of had different hair color as well. So, I don't know, though. You know? I don't know, because here's the thing. If I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for just a hot second. The fact that Suire does not have the same hair color as either the mom or the dad, that could mean nothing. But this series does have a habit of having hair colors connect. So, because Lolan has the same hair color as her mom. So there's that. It could be, if we get the reveal later on, that Suire was actually the mom that has her as a baby. What if that's not her actual mom? What if she's not actually Shisho's daughter? What if she was brought in by the doctor and the unnamed woman kind of took her in and they had her posing as a daughter, but she was actually still the OG Emperor's daughter? I'm sure it's not right. I'm sure that's not correct, but I'm just saying there's a possibility. The timelines would kind of add up to be correct. The timeline would add up if the doctor brought Suire back and she shows like, well, I'll take her in since who knows if I'll have a daughter or not. And then she got out and was like, oh, what's this? It could be. It could add up to that, which if that were the case, and I'm saying there's like a 5% chance that's the case, but if that were the case and Suire was still the OG Emperor's actual daughter and the illegitimate, half-sister of the current emperor, then it would kind of make more sense why Shisho is okay with Suire being... It would make more sense why he's more okay with Suire being tortured and used the way that she is, because she's actually not his biological daughter. That would make more sense. That would kind of... it doesn't excuse his actions, but it would justify them a little more. But I could see him being like, well, we'll take her in and just have her as our own kid. But I don't know. That could be a total false claim, and she could actually be Shisho's biological daughter with this woman. Again, this series, we don't know. We were already there. Yep. And it shows her Lady Shinme threw my mother and I out of the mansion. We don't get to see the woman's face to know for sure, because Suire does not have eyes or anything like Shisho. So she doesn't look at all like Shisho. So we don't get that connection because we can't see the mom's eyes. Yeah. We were thrown out and we were used as servants. She even hated the fact that my name contained the character signifying our clan name. Okay. Shisui was her name. And then they changed it to Suire. Okay. Lolan seems to like that name. And then she says she could have chosen any other name as her servant pseudonym. And Suire says, well, that's just how she is. Yeah, so Lolan, Suire knows that Lolan is actually very kind and caring and a nice person. She's just, her mom is a total tart and terrible. And Maomao's like, okay, even though they were born from the same father, just because their mothers were different. One gets treated as a treasured princess to be given to the emperor, and the other is sent in as a court lady to scheme in the shadows of the rear palace. Yeah, essentially both of these daughters were offered up, and we'll just, that theory is very unlikely. So we're going to say that the OG emperor's half, illegitimate child is still a mystery to us, and we'll just assume that Suire is Shisho's actual daughter. It is very telling how lineage affects things, because, it's just like, technically if you view Genshi as the brother of the current emperor, even though we as the audience know he's the son. But anyway, it's just that fact of like, there's Genshi over here and his responsibilities, and the OG emperor and his responsibilities. It reminds me of when I was growing up in the US, it was always Prince William and Prince Harry for the royal family in England. Like, I always thought of it the same thing. Prince Harry's responsibilities and duties are vastly different than Prince William's because of their being brothers and the family lineage and the heir system and all that. It kind of, that's the most modern example that I can think of to compare it to. But in here, Lolan, because she's Shinme's daughter and there's the tie to nobility, she's expected to be the consort that becomes the emperor's potential empress. Meanwhile, Suire, who has the same dad, is sent to scheme in the shadows of the rear palace to get the things to make the immortality medicine, which now all makes sense. She was doing it for Shinme, scheming to assassinate Genshi because I'm sure that was part of Shinme's plans, and doing all of this as a court lady and then as a eunuch, like potentially putting her life at risk multiple times in broad daylight, but she had to do it because Shinme said, well, you have to. You're not my kid. So you're the sacrifice. Yep. And then Suire was part of the attempt to assassinate Master Genshi at the ceremony. Yeah. She used the explosion at the warehouse as a cover, which she could have gotten hurt in. She could have gotten caught during the assassination attempt. She could have gotten hurt during the explosion when she was stealing ceremonial tools. She had all these attempts that could have hurt her. And then she escaped death, feigning death, with the immortality potion. She must have been the mastermind behind the FIFA attack the other day with Shisho. Yeah, Shisho was clearly, he's not innocent at all. He's in on all of this. The thing is, here's the thing, Suire made the immortality potion to feign death and then escape, but we saw the effects of it. So a part of you would be like, if she gave that to Shinme and Shinme lived through it, then Suire would be dead. Right? But the sad thing is, Suire has been the closest to getting to it, but Shinme doesn't acknowledge her at all as being remotely capable of doing such things, which is like, it's a thing in itself. So yeah, clearly Shisho is in on this. And then she's like, Master Genshi, as the manager of the real palace, was trying to make changes, but it wasn't in line with what Shisho was doing. Yeah, a lot of things that Genshi was doing was causing, like, I feel like Genshi doing all these little things was leading to an escalation of Shisho feeling like they had to take action because the things Genshi was doing was going to meddle with their plans later on. So all that makes sense. And she's like, is that all? Then, girl, she gets so close to figuring out. She knows. She has to know. Girl, Maomao, my girl, you are so smart. You have to know Genshi is related to the emperor. Even if you don't know if it's his brother or son or whatever, you have to know he's related. She all but connects the dots together. All but connects. And she even asks, she's like, would Genshi be able to trick all three of the men? And she's like, no. They would feel down there and realize there's a penis. So she's like, the only close male relative the emperor has is his younger brother. But the age doesn't match up. But he sometimes acts younger than he looks. Girl, you know. You know. She knows. I feel like she's going to see Genshi ride up on a beautiful horse and be like, oh yeah. So that puts it all together. She's like, curse these Oxbazors. And then she just smiles. The anime makes her have the most beautiful smile. Like, let's just not worry about it. I'm like, let's not worry about... I mean, to Maomao's credit, worrying about Genshi being the actual emperor's brother / son would cause her a lot more distress, because then she'd be paranoid, being like, oh, does me being captured... is it going to escalate tensions? Like, I think it would make Maomao feel more guilty if she accepted that Genshi was the imperial prince. I think that would make her feel more guilty right now of what's going on, of being like, how could I have gotten taken hostage and escalated this? And, oh no. But instead, she's like, we're just not going to worry about it. And we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. But damn, is it frustrating. Damn, is it frustrating. And then she's like, okay, it's going to start snowing hard. You know, she said this is called a stronghold. It's backed by a cliff. So yeah, you're going to have to come from the front unless you got Eagles Lord of the Rings style to come through. They're sneaking out to meet people in secret. The workshop's making all these cutting edge weapons. Are they trying to start a war? Well, that's what we think. And then Suire's like, I really don't want it to escalate to that, but it's not for me to decide. Which God, I love Suire so much in this. Because Lolan said what she did, I need you to at least pretend to make medicine. Just don't anger Shinme. And she's like, oh, no worries. Don't plan on that happening. But yeah, she's like, with the snow outside, I probably won't make it back to the village. So, is this where the previous apothecary was? Oh, look at this treasure left behind. I love that she opens up and she's like, I have all these books. I have all these things I can read. I can at least educate myself while I'm trapped in this secondary prison. Let's go. But man, I really like Suire in this episode. Meanwhile, she's like, I heard somewhere that wars happen when farmers aren't busy. Assuming this is Shihokushu, the northern region. Okay, so she breaks down what's going on here. That she's like, okay, well, farming season is over soon. So the reason why it would break out whenever the farmers aren't busy is because you use the farmers as soldiers, right? Once the harvest is over, you don't have to worry about the food situation. So then you can use the farmers as soldiers, and then you don't have to worry about any crops not being harvested and people running out of food. Like, essentially, that would make a lot of sense. So then she says that this is the Shihoku, so the rear palace. We basically do like a little map over here to kind of summarize what we do. So it's 10 days by boat from the rear palace. So 10 days by boat, and that marker is about dead. And then from there, then to the hot springs of the village by foot. Then you have to go to the village. Village by foot, which probably takes you like at least half a day. And then a horse carriage. And then the mountain range. What mountain is in that range? Yeah. So then you had a carriage. So she's trying to like retrace how she got there. The thing is, I feel like with how they transported her, they were trying to be covert and sneaky and not let the Imperial Palace know what they were doing. So they probably took the long way around. So do I think it's going to take 12 days for Genshi and them to reach the Stronghold? Not necessarily, because if they're just deciding we're just going to go and take the straight as an arrow, straight as the crow flies route to the Stronghold, they might cut down a lot of time. So I don't know how they're going to do that. I'm assuming we might find out in the next couple episodes. I also like Maomao being like, geography is not my subject, which I'm right there with her. Geography is like my worst subject, so I get it. So then we have Shisho. We have Kyo. And Kyo wants to explore. What's interesting is they brought Kyo from the village there. He's like, when I was brought here from the village, he insisted he'd come too, but Suire seemed reluctant. Okay, so Suire's like, I don't really want to take you to Shinme. That seems like a bad idea. Maybe she wanted to keep him at the village. He would be safer there, obviously. If the Shi clan rebels, the punishment would extend to the entire clan. Ah, okay. No one would be spared, not even the women, the children, or the babies. That's where the series gets a little bit dark. And this series has a tendency to get dark without being gruesome, which I respect. It's horrifying. But what they're essentially saying is, yeah, he's part of the Shi clan. So if this war happens, then Kyo, basically his life is in danger. So maybe Suire was like, if you stay in the village, you can pass off as another clan and they won't kill you. But if you come to the Stronghold with us, and they show up and find you, you're probably going to get captured and you're probably going to die. So I could see why she wouldn't want that to happen. Do the children know? Did the adults tell them? I love Maomao questioning that, being like, do these kids actually know what they're involved in? Do they realize? Because you have Lolan, who I feel like has known since she was a kid what her mission has been, what has been, dealt with her. But a lot of these kids, I don't think have a clue. So I wonder if Maomao would try to appeal to Genshi and say, hey, let's not kill these kids. They don't even know, right? Which that always, whenever there's a war, that always makes me so angry and frustrated because a lot of these kids, especially if they're like under 5, they don't know. They don't know what's going on. And so it's like, I always feel the worst for children during war because they just don't know. I think Grave of the Fireflies, if you ever watched that film, does a beautiful job of explaining. Like they get what the concept is and they know that people are off to war and they have this very generalized blanket view of what it is, but they don't know the intricacies of modern politics that most adults don't understand modern politics. So I always feel bad because kids don't really understand, and it just completely leaves a horribly skewed view of so many things, and that's a discussion for another day. But I feel for Maomao being like, should I write this off as someone else's problem? But I think her and Genshi are going through the same thing this episode, and both of them are, because this entire series, we've had all of their adventures of being the apothecary and the eunuch and all of this, and they've been able to do their own thing, but kind of disregard the broader picture that's happening around them. And now it's starting to reach a point, as we see in this episode, where that's no longer an option. Maomao, whether she likes it or not, is Locken's daughter. And she, whether she likes it or not, is tied to the Imperial Palace, is an important figure that's gained notoriety, that the Emperor has shown favor to, that she can't escape that label anymore. Genshi, which we'll talk about Genshi with Locken, is going through the same deal. They both have tried to skirt around responsibility, and they really can't do that anymore. So it's like, what are you going to do now? Meanwhile, speaking of which, we have Lolan's whole situation with being raised by her mom, where like if my mom laughed, I would laugh. If my mother was angry at my father, I would mimic her and be angry with, this is where I would get angry with her. It's like Lolan has not been able to have her own genuine set of emotions. She's just had to follow suit with whatever her parents have told her and act accordingly like a puppet as they've trained her to do, right? And as long as I remain her puppet, she won't get angry at me, which is really sad in a sense, because she's like, if I just do what my mom tells me, it won't get worse. But we've seen that has come at the cost of Suire getting hurt. It's come at the cost of other people dying. It's like, no, your mom's not going to get any better just because you're following and are complicit. Authoritative people, if you fall in line thinking that that's going to make them better, that doesn't work. So she kind of has learned this, firsthand. And I feel for Lolan. I do. I feel for her. I really like her character. I feel like her character is more one that I've seen in other stories, and I sort of have in my mind what her trajectory is going to be. She's going to rebel against her mom. She's going to snap, break off and do her own thing, because it's going to get to the point where Suire is about to die or Maomao is about to die and she's not going to be able to handle it. So her trajectory seems a little bit more predictable, whereas Suire, I'm like, I have no clue where they're going with Suire. I don't. And I find her character so compelling because she is so different than what I thought of her at the beginning of season 1 when she was introduced. She seemed so much more menacing and threatening. And that's not a bad thing that she's not, but she seemed kind of like, I didn't know what her motivation was. And so I felt like she wasn't going to be as compelling of a character. So I'm like, oh, is she just a villain that's motivated by this one note thing? No, she has a lot of layers to her. And this season, giving her vulnerability, showing her relationship with Shinme and Lolan, like, it makes her so interesting. And Lolan's interesting too. But I'm like, girl, you're going to rebel against your mom. We all know it's going to happen. But I felt so bad for Suire. Like, Shinme yelling at her, saying she shouldn't have been born. Like, oh. Like, I hate it. She's like, you and that woman, too. Acting as my mother's puppet will not stop her. No, Lolan, you need to... she's like, oh, it's all useless. The one thing, I noticed that far too late. And she has, like, the sunshine shining on her. I feel like Lolan is also connected to Genshi and Maomao in that she's having this moment where she has to take responsibility because she's in a place of privilege. So... it's like you have 3 people. You have Maomao, Lolan, and Genshi. Lolan right now, as of this episode, is like, I should do something different. I should take responsibility because my mom, it's not going to help if I stay her puppet, but it's not going to change things, so why bother? Like, that's kind of where she is right now. Do I think she's going to stay that way? No, of course not, but that's where she's at right now. Meanwhile, Maomao is like, should I take responsibility and take action? I'm not really in the position to... Lolan is in position to do something, but right now she doesn't want to do it. Maomao is not quite in the position to do something, but she's realizing that when she gets in that position, she may have to do something. Genshi is the sweet spot that mixes both of those two others together, Maomao and Lolan. Genshi's in the position to take action, and he's realized he needs to take action. So we'll get to him in a hot second. But yeah, so Shinme wants to speak with her, and she's like, it's musky in here. There's a scent of musk. There's clearly like aphrodisiacs and like pheromones and stuff all in the air, but there's like all these women with different men, and they've all been drugged. And Maomao, from working in the pleasure district, probably not only is familiar with this kind of act being done, but that one expression, she seemed very abhorrent of it. She was like, yeah, I'm not about this. She's like, we wouldn't even do this in the pleasure district, so what is this business? But yeah, meanwhile, there's a woman there has blue hair, kind of like Suire, that's doing her nails. So we'll see about that. And then we have a guy massaging her feet, and she's like, where's my potion of immortality? And it's like, well, you've had me here for 12 hours. I don't know what you expected. She's like, oh, I see. And here you have Suire basically being the ugly stepsister, taking care of Anastasia. I expect some kind of result by tomorrow. And she's like, really, that's it? But yeah, Maomao's taken out the pin that was Lolan's, and she's just kept Genshi's pin in. And she's like, well, shit, I've got to think of something. So something's got to happen by tomorrow. Otherwise, Maomao's going to get punished. So next week, we might find out what exactly that is. But meanwhile, she's like, the previous apothecary must have been really good. But then we see Kyo show up with all these kids, which having all these kids in the stronghold is really disturbing, especially if they're moms. I wonder if the mothers of these kids are being basically used to sway the positions of like male generals or something like that. And it was making like a brothel setup, which is disturbing, but I wouldn't put it past Shinme. I like that Maomao thinks Kyo's a little shit, and she thinks he's an annoying little brat, but the moment he shows vulnerability and feels bad because he can't find his mom, that's when like Maomao's protective mother switch turns on, and she's like, oh hell no, we're not going to do this to Kyo. He doesn't deserve that. I was like, yes, Maomao, absolutely. So he asks where his mom is. Now, was she the woman on the bed with that man? I don't know. And she's like, and she doesn't tell a lie. She is truthful, saying, I don't know what she looks like, so I can't say. And he's like, oh, well, they say my mom's really busy with work. They must have kept him at the Hot Springs Village to keep him away from his mother. Yeah, he was a hostage too. That leads me to believe that the mom is not in the room with Shinme, because when Maomao's face falls, she's like, that mom could be dead. But I don't want to tell him that because it's just conjecture, and that's a pretty bold statement to make. She's like, so I can't say that specifically. And then she's like, well, I gotta go now. When he stops her and she turns back, the look on his face, Kyo's little face, where he's like, it's like in that moment he kind of realizes like, is my mom dead? But he doesn't want to say it out loud and ask Maomao because that would bring it into possible reality, and he can't do that. At that moment, Maomao's like, oh, hell no. We're not going to let this kid suffer. She's like, nope. Meanwhile, the rest of this episode is Lahan, Locken, Loman, and Genshi, featuring Gaoshun and Basen. And I was like, I've been waiting for a scene like this, because ever since Locken freaked out in the last episode, I thought he was immediately going to go to Genshi, and even Genshi's like, I thought you'd be here by now. But he was getting his shit in order, getting the order to be like, let's go invade, let's do this. So Lahan has done all these preparations, and he's like, well, it's just conjecture based on the numbers. I like that you have Lahan and Maomao talking about conjecture and evidence. Lahan has something to back up his conjecture, where he's like, look, if we look at the figures, something's not adding up. I'm just saying the numbers don't lie. They are here. What do we do with these numbers? But he says the stronghold to the north, governed by Shisho, is expanding. Imagine that. I like that Shisho was the one governing it and it's expanding, but it was originally abandoned and there was no mention of expansion to us. Well, how about that? That seems a bit... And Genshi's like, that seems like rebellion and like a problem. Even if the Shi clan has formed fealty since the era, this is unforgivable. Gao Shun's like, yeah, even though they've been loyal to us since the dawn of time, if they're doing this without asking, that's a big problem. And we need to look into that. How far along are they? Well, given the timing of the rising iron price, they are pretty far along with their preparations. And I like that Lahan's like, I would recommend quick action. And the moment that door slammed open, I was like, oh, that's Lahan. Here we go. Here we go, bitches. And he's like, what are you doing, Lahan? Ah! I love it. I love that. So Lahan is actually Lahan's nephew. He's his brother's son, the brother that we don't speak of, or the dad we don't speak of because they're not great people. But Lahan's been adopted by Lahan as going to be the head. Since Lahan's the head of the family, Lahan is the heir, which is great. Good for Lahan. I think Maomao's fine with that. But yeah. I like how, so Kyo's hair kind of like flips out sort of like Lahan's, which is interesting. And then Lahan's like, oh, hey, Dad. How's it going? And Genshi's like, master strategist. Yes. You must not be visiting this precious noble so often. This precious noble, you're bound to make people suspicious. Which again, it's like Genshi is supposed to be a eunuch who's just in charge of their palace. So someone connected to the chief strategist visiting him all the time would be suspicious. So Lahan's like, let's talk about this, especially since it's hard to tell if this noble is a man or a woman. Now, to me, that line was saying a couple of things. It's like, one, did Lahan pick up that it was Aduo meeting with them in Shisho? Did he pick that up? Did he figure that out? Because Lahan can't read faces unless it's Loman and unless it's Maomao or Fengshen. But Lahan's really smart and probably uses other senses to detect things. Did he, by the power of observation, know that it was Aduo with them as the imperial prince? And he was like, oh, while you're sitting here doing paperwork and having fun times, there's a woman impersonating you as the imperial prince. What are we doing? That seems like what that meant to me. And Boston's like, excuse me. And Gao Shun's like, let him talk. Let him talk. So then Lahan comes up and tells Gao Shun something. I think he was telling him that Loman was coming. I think that's what he was trying to say, was that Loman was on his way and I'm going to go get him. And because we're going to need him to settle down Lahan, because Lahan is very emotional like Genshi. He's like, I know what you're trying to say, Master Strategist. You're dissatisfied with my shiftless cowardice. And Lahan's like, yeah, kind of. My daughter's been kidnapped. We're going to do something about that. And Genshi's like, I'm surprised it took him this long to get here, considering how much he dotes on Maomao. But there's the secret escape route, the missing eunuch, the servant girl that doesn't exist, apparently. And now we were always one step behind, and that resulted in Maomao being kidnapped. And Genshi's like, I'm responsible for this. Which, to be fair to Genshi, a lot of things happened that I don't think Genshi could have been made aware of, but now that it's happened, it's like, are you just going to sit there and be like, it's my fault, or are you going to take action and do something about it? And that's kind of why Lahan's there. And he's like, despite the presence of a certain someone who can walk in and out of the rear palace at will, my daughter was kidnapped. So Lahan's like, despite the fact that we've got this to deal with, which is a problem, my daughter's gone now. And that someone is leisurely taking his time with his paperwork rather than going after my daughter. Can I assume you don't care about the life of a single woman? Which is such a layered statement, because it's not only talking about Genshi posing as a eunuch who's supposed to be protecting the flowers in the emperor's garden, so there's that connection, but there's also the line of, wait, didn't you walk out with my daughter in your arms last season, that you clearly care about her, but now you're not doing jack shit, so what about that? Like, he's adding all this up, saying he's basically not using conjecture to say, I know you like my daughter, why aren't you doing anything? But he's getting really close to it. And Genshi, I'm surprised Genshi was as calm as he was in his response and wasn't like, how dare you? And says like, you know, I'm going to let you vent your frustration, but our enemy is Shisho, not me. Like, he's remarkably calm during this exchange. And Locken's like, what I'm saying is, now that you figured all this out, as I have, why are you still sitting here? He's like, why are you still here? What are you waiting on? Are you waiting for them to kill her and bring her body back? Are you waiting for them to ship her hairpin in blood to you? Like, I like that Locken's like, I get why you're being calm, but at the same time, what are we doing now? Why aren't we getting things prepped? You're the prince. Now's not the time to be Genshi. Now's the time to step up and be the prince. I know that Boston's like just so mad in the background. And Genshi's like, so he knows everything, but he knows I lack the confidence to assume my rightful position. He knows how I ran away from it and to spend my time here instead. And I love it. I love Locken saying your appearance, your work, they are all half measures. And you think everything will just work out somehow. I love it. I love that there's clearly a difference defined in this moment between waiting until you have evidence, which is all about Maomao Loman, what the series has preached. You wait till you have evidence before you make any assumptions. But Locken's like, we have all the evidence. We know it. Now we need to do something. Here's the difference. It's not all just going to work out. And Gaoshun, of course, Gaoshun probably is thinking the same thing, but because of his position working with Genshi, he can't say that out loud. But Locken can, because Locken has that ability. He's like, can you ever hope to achieve acting? What can you ever hope to achieve acting as a sorry eunuch? Now, in this moment, I love that Loman comes in, because Loman essentially tries to smooth over some things, because Locken has basically said, I know you're not Genshi. I know that you're the prince. And that's a bold statement. That's a bold statement. And that is a statement that could theoretically get Locken in trouble, theoretically, but it doesn't. And Loman comes in to smooth things over to be like, are you talking about me? I'm sorry that I'm a sorry eunuch. I love that. I love that Loman comes in, because Genshi doesn't have anything to say, because yeah, he is just pretending to be a eunuch. He's like, you're pretending to not be a man. Well, how about now we be one? You know? And Genshi is about to say something when Loman's like, let's take a moment and think about what we're about to say. I love that Locken and Maomao both love Loman so much. Locken becomes a little kid around his uncle, and he's like, oh, uncle. And he immediately, like, he's like, Maomao, they are all so appreciative and in love with Loman, and it's so cute. I love it. And he's like, oh, he's like, hey, let me come in. I love him just walking in, and Locken's face immediately gets just crestfallen. He's like, I had no idea you saw me as a sorry eunuch. And Locken's like, no. It's not as though I wanted to become a eunuch, you know. I love that, which I feel bad for Loman. He didn't want to become a eunuch, and he's like, I wasn't referring to you. He's like, no. He's like, I'm quite the sorry eunuch indeed. I can't even walk right. And it's like, dude, don't be... Again, this is where Maomao gets her self-deprecating humor from and her self-loathing. Like, Loman, you're not setting a good example with that, but it's so true. He's like, I was carried here by carriage. How extravagant of me. Man, Maomao gets a lot from Loman. She really does in terms of this. I'm also responsible for not keeping an eye on Maomao. He's like, it's all of our fault that this has happened, not just Genshi's. And of course, Locken's like, oh, you're perfect. I would never blame you. And Lahan's like, yeah, he's here. He made it. I'm like, where'd you go, Lahan? How'd you get behind him? You're always so quick to become aggressive when you're irritated. Again, I love Loman calming Locken down. Loman and Maomao both have the ability to calm these quick-tempered men down. Because Genshi can get quickly irritated, as we saw in episode 18, and Locken can get quickly irritated, and then Loman and Maomao are like soothing aloe vera. They are like balm that's just like, no, let's chill for a second. Let's think things through. You should think about the situation other people are in as well. Loman's like, look, Genshi has a lot going on here, so we can't just completely blame him in the moment. I love it. I love this entire exchange. He's like, I know, Uncle. You know, an exchange took an unexpected turn. I love that Genshi's like, exchange? I didn't get 2 words in edgewise. That is so funny. He's like, I didn't get to say anything. And he's like, perhaps there's something you should be saying politely before starting this fight, is there not? I love that he's like, you know that. I like that Loman says in that moment, you know that Genshi is the crown prince, but you came in here yelling at the crown prince. That could get you in a lot of trouble, Locken, even though he's not the emperor, he's the emperor's brother, son. So you need to do this the correct way. Don't be using your authority to vent your frustrations. Like, let's do this the right way. And Locken, the light shining on him. Oh, this moment was so good. I love it so much. And it's like just dusk, like before, like the sun is literally setting on Genshi being the eunuch. The sun is setting on Genshi being the eunuch. And it's going to rise the next day. There's going to be Genshi with like these banners behind him on a horse being the crown prince. Like, it's going to happen. But it's like the dawn is going to rise with him being the crown prince and taking up that mantle. You know it's going to happen. Yep. And the thing about it is, it very well can happen. And Genshi could go back to working in the rear palace after this. Because if you think about it, the women that are the consorts and the concubines and the servants, they're not allowed to leave the rear palace. So they have no clue what's going on in the outer palace or with the kingdom. They're just going to hear about it. So the imperial prince could show up leading the army, doing his duties, and then he could go back to working in the rear palace as Genshi, and the women would be none the wiser, right? Maomao would really be the only one that, like him, can go between both points and would know the difference. So it could still work out in the end. But yeah, I love him bowing down. And Locken is so dramatic. He just flares those sleeves out. He's such a drama king, and I love it. And everybody's like, okay, all right, Locken. I love it. And he says, okay, I'm asking you as a plea, go rescue my daughter. But not just that. He's like, I came to you with a plea. I humbly request that you rally the army to defeat Shisho the traitor. He's like, I can't just come here and request that you save my daughter, even though that is my ultimate MO. I can't just come here and do that. There is no reason for you to accept that. I get it. But Shisho's a traitor, and if we defeat him, that will also, in alignment, rescue my daughter as well. That you rally the army to defeat him. And so Genshi's like, okay. And then he lays out the plans. And then Lahan lays them out too, saying the Shi clan seems to have been manufacturing a cutting-edge model of FIFA for several years now. For years now! So that's the thing. There's also the assassination attempt using said FIFA, as well as the case of Lolan's escape. Like, all of it adds together in this moment. And Loman's like, okay. And Lolan's escape is connected to Maomao. We have all the evidence to prove that this is a rebellion. It's not conjecture anymore. It is evidence. It is presented. It is here. There is no questioning it. There is no waiting around being like, well, we'll just figure it out whenever we get concrete evidence. It's here. It's right there. He's like, now we need to do something about it. We need to address this problem immediately. And I love that you have Locken in the front, kneeling, saying we need to resolve this issue with the traitor. You have Lahan, his son, beside him, saying we have the evidence, here it is. Then you have Loman, who cannot kneel because of his broken legs, and is sitting there with his head bowed, being like, and if you could rescue my daughter while you're at it, that'd be great too. So you have your entire in-laws right in front of you making this plea. Genshi, this politeness is not extended to Genshi the eunuch. No. If Shisho is to be taken down as punishment for rebellion, it has to be by the forbidden army directly under the emperor, which would need to be mobilized. And they would not be under the direction of Grand Commander Lockant, but by the Imperial Prince. Yeah. Lockant's like, I'm a strategist, but I'm not the one leading the army. No, I'm just making the plans and you're the one leading the army. And I love Lockant saying, how long do you intend to fool everyone with your false role, Master Genshi? I also love the subtle shade with that too, and the way that Genshi reflects in his monocle. I love it because he's saying like, how long you also gonna fool my daughter? Because you need to be honest with her as well. Or rather, Moon Prince. So yeah, Genshi standing up. I knew this day was inevitable. It just happens to be today. Yep. So they all know. They all know he's the Emperor's brother/son. And it's like, now it's time for me to take charge. Yes, sir! Absolutely! You need to go rescue your lady! Go do it! Please, I've talked for an hour and 15 minutes about this episode! Ah! Yep. Oh, this episode was amazing. This is my favorite episode of season 2. It is. There's been several episodes that have come close, but all of the reveals, the theorizing, Lockant and Genshi's conversation, the stuff with Suire, and we still have 21, 22, 23, 24. We have 4 episodes left. There's a lot that can happen in 4 episodes. Quite a bit. Now, here's the thing. Do I think that they are going to get to the army invading in 4 episodes? Maybe. I could see them showing up. Yeah, I could see them showing up. I could either see them showing up and there being a battle and Maomao getting rescued in 4 episodes. I could see that because it's not like an all-out war. It's mainly with this one clan who is working with envoys and doing all that. So I could see that being resolved in 4 episodes. I could also see them like hinting at the war starting at the end of season 2, and then we have to wait till season 3 to see it all go down. We'll see what happens, but this episode was amazing. I love it so much. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers, no hints, no clues. I will look at the OP next week, as long as y'all say it's okay. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with episode 21 of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye!